previous play will go under review.
Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday evening. Welcome, one and all, to anybody who is a returning guest of the show, someone who has caught us for the first time. We welcome you. Thank you so much for being here on this week's episode of Under Review. And the vibes are seemingly at an all-time high, or at the very least a year high, for Bills fans as they come off a massive 47-10 win over the Jacksonville Jaguars on Monday Night Football, a game that will be remembered no matter how the course of the year goes super fondly from this fan base, as it seemed like the Bills played a perfect game of football. Everything was complementing everything, and it felt good to watch. And we will be going over that, as well as previewing this upcoming Sunday night matchup against the Baltimore Ravens, a very highly anticipated matchup between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, as well as just some other key matchups that we're keeping an eye out for. So we are going to get into the crux of that. And joining me tonight is the one and only from the Air Raid Hour, Mr. David Tilton, who is joining me after Monday night kind of shuffled both of our schedules. I'm going to bring him in a moment. If you could see my tagline tonight, though, it's a little different than what I usually do on this program. Normally I do a Joe pun, but I made tonight's "We Love You, Gibson." And the reason I'm doing that is because, unfortunately, about a week prior to this episode, my family lost our dog, Gibson, who we've had in our lives for about 11 years. And it is a unique experience to lose a pet. I personally haven't ever experienced this before. But Gibson was a pure soul, a beautiful animal, and just truly one of the greatest beings you could ever be around. And it's been a tough time for the family and I, but I only bring this up and I only add this tagline, one, to honor the memory of one of the most wonderful animals, again, you could ever meet, but to also remind every person who may watch this show, every person who may have a pet, to just embrace that time, cherish those animals, and love them with all your heart, because I promise you, the love you give to that animal will help make the memories of them so much better when the day unfortunately comes. So just give them an extra pet for me. Give them an extra belly rub for me, no matter what the animal is. If you have a pet fish, tap the bowl, I guess. Give it a little extra food. But just love those pets and take care of them and give them all my love, because that's what Gibson would want. And, that's what my family would want. So we love you, Gibson. Thanks for taking care of my family. Thanks for taking care of my dad. We miss you, but we'll see you again someday. On a more bright note, we're going to kick this episode off. And as I mentioned to you all before, got my buddy here, Mr. David Tilton. And David, thank you so much for being here tonight. I apologize for rolling this out on a somber note, but now let's get into the good vibes, which is this Buffalo Bills Jacksonville Jaguars game. First and foremost, how you doing tonight, man? How's everything going?
Doing great. Man, what one of the most stress-free games we've seen as Bills fans even in the Josh Allen era, to be honest. And there was at no point in time in that game last night where I felt like, the typical Bills cynicism, Bills fan cynicism of like, oh, well, can't let up here. There's a chance that these guys could come back. Like I was weirdly at peace and thinking like there is no chance this Jacksonville team is going to come back and do anything against this Bills team. And the end of the day, the Bills still outscored Jacksonville in the second half, even with playing Josh Allen only about 3 quarters plus, or a quarter plus, I should say, in the second half. So the vibes are high. The Bills are one of, a handful of teams that still remain undefeated. The division is looking, for the taking right now with the struggles of Miami, as we saw against Seattle without Tua. The Patriots look like they're maybe going to be in shambles in that week 1 win against the Bengals, seeming like maybe a fluke. And then you got the Jets, who are still kind of there, but if this was going to be a 3-horse race, it's looking like maybe now it's only going to be a 2-horse race.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's been a very odd year in the AFC that is usually so competitive, with a lot of teams coming out of the gate making their kind of presence known. And then you look at who's sitting on top of it right now. And you have the usual suspects in Kansas City and Buffalo, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, listen, I've always thought Mike Tomlin was going to make that team competitive. And anytime someone tells me, like, oh, this is the year they have a losing record, when have you ever had any reason to believe he would coach them to a losing record? Like, but I wasn't prepared for 3-0 given the current circumstances. And then a lot of these teams just kind of really coming out of the gate sloppy, maybe dealing with injuries, not looking like their usual selves. I mean, even Miami in our own division is just an example of that, who's dealt with some adversity early on, and it really could come to bite them. And then, of course, Cincinnati being 0-3, which you just would have never expected. And I would have never expected it for Jacksonville either, David. I mean, that's a team that, they draft Brian Thomas Jr., and you look at the receiving core, and yes, they lost Calvin Ridley, but there's so much explosiveness in that offense, and there's so many threats vertically, horizontally, a really good outside runner in Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby showing flashes. And then you look at their first two games and you say, okay, they're 0-2. They shouldn't be. And I said this last week. They're talented. They're competitive. They're staying in each of these games. The defense is getting after Tua and Deshaun Watson. The front seven looks fast and physical. Like, this is not a team that should be this bad. So our expectations going into this matchup are probably a dogfight, probably a close game. And the Bills just dominate them in every which way, offensively, defensively, from the very start. And it was just unrelenting. And as a Bills fan, you have to feel super encouraged, because when you looked at this team in the offseason, you saw retooling, possible soft rebuild, and you thought, okay, maybe we shift our expectations a little bit, and maybe we think like a little less of Super Bowl, but maybe like a more modest, like a 10-11, 9, whatever win team. So far, they've given you every reason to believe that they haven't strayed from that path, that they are a Super Bowl contender, and everything that they have, despite the circumstances being different from preseason in terms of injuries and roster personnel, are just good. Everything is working. Everything is clicking. And I'm just curious to see if they keep it up. But David, let's just get more into this matchup, and we're going to start with the offense. And I just want to hear, anything, any person, anything that you just really loved about this performance and want to highlight on the show tonight.
Well, if you haven't had a chance, Eric dropped the film room analysis on Josh Allen's game a couple hours ago, and did a really good job breaking down sort of what some of these easy button plays, as he called them, in the video that Joe Brady dialed up. And this was Joe Brady's best game of the year, in my opinion, and he's had 3 good ones. So we did expect, or at least I did expect, that given the matchup, given how Jacksonville has kind of fared defending the run, injuries in the secondary, that the Bills may open up the playbook a bit in this game against the Jaguars, going a little bit more pass heavy on that opening drive, that sort of scripted drive. And they just didn't look back. A lot of the plays were setting up Josh Allen for multiple reads. And one of the things Eric pointed out in the film room, and something that was very apparent after rewatching the game, was that first, second, third reads being in his line of vision without him having to change his launch point, his feed, his head too much, really made things a lot easier for him and allowed him to get the ball out quickly against a Jacksonville front that was formidable and is probably still will be formidable for the rest of this year. But the Bills neutralized that. The Jags playing a ton of man coverage, didn't get out of that too much. And the Bills just found a way with these play calls from Joe Brady, and with the way that the reads and the progressions were crafted for some of these plays, made it really easy on Josh Allen. And like, just getting back to the Jags really quick, I mean, they are in a, they were in a tough spot coming in this game defensively anyway. They were down some guys injury wise. And you thought maybe like their chance was going to be to try to get pressure and fluster Josh Allen early. And that didn't happen. So from the Bills offense starting out of the gates fast, I think they just didn't look back. That has been a struggle for this team at times, is starting out quick on offense.
Mm-hmm.
That was not the struggle yesterday. And I think when this team on offense, Joe Brady early in the game, Josh Allen early in the games, finds that rhythm, it's going to be like a snowball effect. I think throughout the course of the season, they will just continue to carry that momentum. So the good news is like the Bills have faced a couple different scenarios early in the season. Slow start on offense against the Cardinals, let's say. The Dolphins a little bit in the middle, and then this Jags game really got it going early. So yeah, I mean, overall, my biggest takeaway and my best impression, I would say, Judge and I do this thing on Air Raid called One Big Thing. My one big thing for this Bills offense has to be Joe Brady and the way he set this game up for Josh Allen. And then obviously the team executed. So it goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with that. When you look at it, just the over encompassing view of the success of this game, you have to look at Joe Brady and you have to look at the wrinkles that he has added and even ones that are a bit different from when he took over last year. Because when we saw him take over, there were pivots to being a bit more run centric and trying to do some creative things with what he was given. But now, with the full offseason of installation, there was always the question of, will we see more play action? Will we see more motion? Are we going to see these wrinkles that we've speculated about? You know, Anthony talking about condensed sets and condensed formations, and Eric and Ant and everyone on this network kind of clamoring to see an uptick in some of the more modern trends in the league. Not saying they didn't do it at all, but definitely saying they didn't do enough. And when you look at last night, especially compared to the first two games, which did incorporate, you know, some differences in how they aligned, like a little bit of more under center, even some times where you had Curtis Samuel, Dalton Kincaid out of the backfield, like different wrinkles. This game felt more like a culmination of everything you wanted in the offseason, almost like Santa answered your Christmas list. Like every little wrinkle that you wanted Joe Brady to install for the sake of Josh Allen's production and the production of an offense that can now be multiple without having to feed through one key player. That's what you got last night. And that really is, to me, scratching the surface of what it could be for the rest of the year. And I just wanted to bring this up, and I found this on Twitter earlier today from Ben Fennell. Offensive motion percentage this year so far, and fourth in the league at 80.4% are the Buffalo Bills. That's behind the Niners, the Dolphins, and the Packers. And last year they were around a 60% rate. So you are so far seeing a heavy uptick in their motion rate, which is helping this team, one, obviously diagnose whether a team's going to sit in zone or man, which is one way to get it to use, but also to just create conflict when you're talking about how they're going to roll out some of their skill position guys, whether it's James Cook, whether it's Khalil Shakir. Because again, Josh Allen likes seeing a static field and he makes it work. But now with the additional wrinkle of what you alluded to, David, with him being able to see a full field read, paired with being able to kind of window dress who you're trying to actually target with some motion pre-snap, that makes this offense so difficult to defend, even if they don't have a Stephon Diggs, even if they don't have an all-pro wide receiver. And by the way, Khalil Shakir is very good. And I think even without having a Diggs or someone like that, they still have really high quality receiving talent. However, you don't have that like name all pro guy, yet you're still able to attack defenses horizontally, vertically, and also the threat of the run, which has been very good, also allows you to get more expansive. So I tip my cap to Joe Brady the same way you did. I think when you talk about the biggest thing for the offense, it's Brady and what he was able to scheme up for Josh. And I'm going to bounce this one off to you, Tilt, because I'm not Judge Mathis. I'm Joge Mathis. But in the spirit of your show, I will include, you know, another thing. And I think that's, and we talked about this in the chat today. Eric's talked about it. I brought it up on a show a while back, but Josh Allen's mechanics, which I said was the number one most underrated thing for the Bills' offensive success this year. I said that I truly believe that Josh refining his mechanics would pay dividends for an offense that's going to rely on him being precise, especially when you talk about yards after catch, leading receivers, hitting them in stride so that they'll be able to, you know, accumulate yards and create explosive plays. That was on full display last night. And I think the really the apex of it was the touchdown to Khalil Shakir, where yes, it's a drag over the middle with Shakir going across, but the ball placed in a perfect spot with perfect touch and perfect speed is what allows Shakir to separate and get that yardage after the catch to score that touchdown. And I just have to say, I think those refined mechanics are paying off, especially when you talk about Josh throwing to all levels of the field in a more timing fashion and not because it's the identity of the offense. So I also just wanted to point that out. But Dave, I'll flip it back to you. You know, anything else you want to add on or anything else we might not have touched on for this offense?
That was a good example. And two really other good examples are the touchdown pass to Keon Coleman, which, you know, falling away off his back foot and just laying it in there and leading him to the point where he doesn't break stride and he gets in to the end zone. Eric pointed out again in his film room, like a lot of quarterbacks would have thrown that out a little bit flatter towards the sideline. Guy catches the ball, kind of just steps out of bounds. The way that Josh threw that ball, because of his mechanics being so refined, so much more refined this year, over the shoulder, leads him to a place on the field where he can continue to run and just walk into the end zone. Same type of thing, by the way, across his body, like a flick of the wrist over the shoulder to Ty Johnson as well. On that touchdown pass was incredible. And the mechanics are important because a lot of people will sit there and be like, oh, Josh Allen's like, turnover prone from the last couple of years and blah, blah, blah. And he needs to improve this and improve that. And a lot of that was more decision making, combined with like maybe slightly subpar mechanics. Because let's be honest, his mechanics were pretty good last year, but he's taken them to a new level this year in combination with the better decision making. And I don't know if it's something that it's a mantra they've kind of employed this year with this sort of everybody eats like phrase they're using, and whether it's Joe Brady, but like it definitely seems like Josh Allen is more willing to take what the defense is giving him this year. So with those mechanics that are improved, with the better decision making up to this point, we've seen a supremely efficient quarterback through the first 3 games. Now, I'm not going to say he's not going to get greedy at some point and go for because that's what he does. And by the way, this kind of segues into the point that like he has been pretty selective as a runner too since he's injured that hand. So we haven't even really seen that element of his game come out a ton. We did see it a little more in this game than we did against Miami, obviously. But that's still something we haven't seen on full display yet. So I'm excited for that as well. But yes, the mechanics do look good, and the decision making coming along with that has him as the most efficient quarterback in the NFL so far this year.
And I'm loving every bit of it. And I truly just believe that with the way the offseason turned out, and take any sort of like behind the scenes anything out of the whole Stephon Diggs scenario, take that out of it and just talk about what the Bills lost offensively and what the Bills lost in terms of leadership and what the expectations were because of those losses from national media, which, they could say they don't hear it, but they absolutely do. I really think that a lot of this is stemming from just the desire to improve, because you kind of have to. If you want to overcome all of the negatives that are getting thrown at the team as far as what your expectations are, what your performance could look like this year, and what your legacy might be as a result, this is the year where you kind of have to like really just step up your game and do whatever you can do to be as locked in as possible. And I equate it a lot to 19 to 20, where Josh really made that overhaul on his mechanics in general. And we saw his best ball. And it felt like, he had a few years where he was coasting off that and he was still fine for the most part, but there were definitely some sloppiness that occurred down the stretch. And I think that just kind of snap to just get back into focus and work with a new revamped offense and be your best self for it is just a welcomed addition to this year. And I'm really excited to see where it takes them. And yeah, I think for offense, I can't really think of anything else. I'll just shout out one final thing, which is the pass protection, which was once again stellar for Josh Allen. And it just, again, needs to be pointed out how good Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins have been playing together this year. And really, Spencer Brown, who just signed a contract extension, is so far paying it off in exponentially more than the value you presented to him, because he hasn't allowed a single quarterback pressure in 85 pass blocking snaps. That is just an absolutely wild stat to consider that 3 games have passed and some of the people on the fronts that they faced aren't particularly nobodies. I mean, maybe the Arizona pass rush isn't the best, but you talk about Jalen Phillips and maybe moving over Chop to the other side. You talk about going up against Trayvon Walker and just, it's not nobody's. And that is something significant that I think I just want to tip my cap to Spencer Brown for, considering the development curve and considering my own personal remarks about his development and my concern for it. To see he's playing at this level is phenomenal. So shout out to the offensive line, but really shout out to him and Dawkins for improved play. And David, any final offensive thoughts before we kick over to defense?
I'll just say, like, James Cook continues to impress. And look, I don't know how things are going to play out exactly, but when Ray Davis has been given a chance, he has looked good. His numbers aren't super efficient because he's been in a lot of late game situations where teams know that the Bills are going to run. But
Mhm.
in the chances he's had where the snaps are, I would say, still meaningful in the game, he's looked really good. And so I just wanted to say that as well. This Bills team improved significantly on third down this week as well.
Mm.
Between third and fourth down, they were 8 for 13 in this game. The 2 games prior, they were 3 for 9, 3 for 9 on third down. So an improvement in that area as well. So shout out to that.
Efficient, effective, didn't need to rely on, the rushing attack this week, even though it did have its moments, like the Cook touchdown and a couple of nice gains earlier on in the game. Just total domination from the offense, and I hope that that isn't the last time we see them truly win that matchup. But very encouraged by so many different things, and with so many mouths to feed in this offense, and everybody getting a plate, everybody eats is true.
I gotta say one more thing on that
Mhm.
because this is an interesting discussion point, right? This whole topic of like unselfishness and like not having to force feed a guy like Diggs, but there is an element to this. I think of they don't have a guy, and I talked with Judge about this too, that has like the ground to stand on to have that kind of ego, if that
Yeah,
makes sense. Like they don't have a guy that's like clearly the alpha and that like, oh, I'm gonna demand 160 targets. So like they don't really have a guy who can have that kind of ego on the team right now. And if they did, it would be certainly misplaced, in my opinion. Khalil Shakir is probably the closest thing to that. So
right.
I think that combined with the fact that they are truly unselfish, it's really worked well. Now, my only concern about that is if you get into a situation in the game where it's crunch time, do you have a go-to guy? I think it's Shakir,
Mm.
and I think it's probably Kincaid as well. A guy that in the toughest moments you're going to be able to go to. I think it's going to be Shakir right now, and that's what it's looked like the first couple weeks. So we'll see if that continues throughout the season.
And I mean, the Shakir, I want to call it resurgence, but it's not really a resurgence. The Shakir just like coming out party and him kind of breaking out into the eyes of the national media isn't, not saying you're saying this, but it's not a new thing either. I mean, you saw pretty much the back half of last year where Shakir was one of the focal points of the offense and was making key plays. I think he has emerged as just someone you can lean on even in crunch time. And I
Yep.
think about week one, I think about them having that hole to climb out of and some of the key receptions he had. I think he'll be big for them throughout the whole year. And even if they don't have that true alpha, high ego, like feed me targets because I'm the best kind of guy, I still think they're going to be able to make it work. And again, if you think the trenches are going to hold up the way they're holding up right now, if you think Joe Brady is going to continue to throw these wrinkles out, I see it as saying that, like, even if you don't have that guy, I am encouraged this could continue, but they're going to be tested. There's a lot of tough defenses down the stretch, and we'll just have to see what it looks like when they face them. But yeah, we'll carry it over to defense now. And, again, kind of had the luxury of the offense just being so unstoppable that they were scoring points, draining clock, and the defense felt like each drive they went out for had less and less pressure to them. But, registering 5 total sacks, one from Jamarcus Ingram, Javon Solomon, I think it was Epineza, Hill, and Vaughn were the others. And you talk about just, again, the cornerbacks, just absolutely phenomenal on the boundary. Christian Benford breaking up that pass on Brian Thomas Jr. Just so much to be encouraged by in the wake of losing 3 of your center points on your defense. So, David, the floor is yours. Let me hear what you liked about this defense.
Well, first, I got to give myself a slight pat on the back because my hot take on the air raid pregame show, and maybe it shouldn't have been a hot take. I thought it was a hot take, was that the Bills defense would get 5 sacks in the game. So they did get that,
Oh,
and so granted, one of them was on Milkbag Mac Jones, but hey, I'll take it.
counts.
It counts all the same. Look, coming into this game, we talked on the pregame. Jacksonville was one of the worst third down conversion teams in the league, 26%. Their yards per reception was high, which tells you they were kind of living off some big plays, even though their third down rate was pretty low. They come into this game, really struggle again on third down, 2 for 13 on third down, went for 8 fourth downs in this game, had only gone for 1
Mm.
or 2 prior to this game. So they were 50% on fourth down. So that efficiency of that Jags offense continued to be an issue as far as converting on third down, sustaining drives. Not having Evan Ingram, I think, was a big deal for them in this game. Um, the Bills did allow some yards to Jonnu Smith against the Dolphins in week 2, who isn't necessarily the, you know, the TE1 that you would like think about like for fantasy or whatever. Like he's definitely a bottom 10 starting tight end, probably, or bottom 15 starting tight end in the league. So not having Evan Ingram hurt Jacksonville. Their offensive line struggled. They held up slightly in the beginning of the game, but the defensive line of the Bills just ultimately wore them out as the game wore on. You could tell Vaughn was getting close multiple times, and then he finally got that one.
Yeah.
He was close multiple times, and so you were just like, he's right there. But this Bills defense, minus those three guys you mentioned, the secondary, I think, has just been absolutely phenomenal. Jamarcus Ingram, Benford, Douglas, the safety. I mean, what can you say about especially the back end where you had question marks about the safety position? The corners have really risen to the expectation that we thought they could be with Benford and Douglas. But the safeties, Hamlin, Rapp, although Rapp seems to almost injure his own player every game, it seems like, on some kind of hit. But this team and Dorian Williams and Balon Spector, that chemistry is clearly there between the two of them as they got a lot of reps together in training camp and on the second unit. So overall, this defense gave a huge shout out to Joe Brady on the offensive side of the ball, obviously, to start the show. Got to give a shout out too now to Bobby Babich. And these two coordinators have just brought a new energy to the team. And maybe it was a year too late. Like maybe the Bills should have done this a year or two ago and went this route. But hey, better late than never, it seems like. Now, these guys are going to face some adversity. Like we're going to talk about the Ravens here in a few minutes, but you got to say, like, they came into this game. ETN killed these guys last year in London, just had a huge game. Obviously, no Ridley this time around, but I think they had a little bit of chip on their shoulder going back to that London game and really didn't want to like fall into the so-called trap against an 0-2, which should have been desperate Jaguars team, and they just absolutely dominated the whole night.
Yeah, they were impressive in all phases. I definitely think last week I had Travis Holmes from Big Cat Country on. He's a writer for Big Cat Country. And we had a great episode. And one of the things he talked about was Doug Peterson and how that offense kind of like, it's weird, but it's almost like they play for a fourth down. And that's what it felt like when you watch the Jags offense, especially when they were getting behind, was that they almost like felt like 4 downs in any spot were necessary. And it's, they did a good job because they were getting to 4th and 1 every time and extending plays. But the Bills were probably so happy to watch you waste time on the clock with a sneak or something to the edges and just like get that yard. We don't care. Like we're up by 14, keep running the clock out. So
especially in that third quarter when like they went on that like 8-minute drive. I'm like, bro, go right ahead. I'll
never understand it. I mean, that's kind of the thing that like, a lot of these metrics for the Bills defense and like mainly in rushing and everything, they're going to reflect kind of, well, not in passing, but in rushing mainly, they reflect poorly. But I'm kind of sitting here thinking like, I think the Bills are totally fine with you running the ball if they got like a 2-touchdown lead or a 10-point lead. Like we'll let you just take the clock down, have a 8-minute drive, because ultimately when the crunch time comes around and you're at the goal line and it becomes a lot less, less space, more condensed, we're going to bring our A game. And that's like a McDermott specialty. So, we'll get to those metrics too when we talk about Baltimore, but like I was kind of just laughing at not the lack of urgency, in the third when they had that first drive where they got the touchdown to Strange and it was like, okay, Jags, like you have life. Let's see if we can put this one away before you start finding yourselves. Then you just see them like methodically go down the field, waste 8 minutes and then just face so much pressure. And you're like, why? Like, and I'm getting angry on your behalf, which is a great luxury to have if you're a Bills fan. Like I love being angry for fans of other teams while they're playing my team, because that's how I know my team's kicking your ass. And that's what it was yesterday. And I just have to give so much credit to Babich. I have to give credit to the fact that despite, again, all the injuries and all the question marks, the safety position has been good. Damar Hamlin getting that pick was awesome to watch. That was an absolutely woefully terrible throw by Trevor Lawrence, but I will give Hamlin credit for being in the spot he needed to be and making that play. Again, I love this Bills D-line. I love the D-line. I love the threat they are when they're healthy. I've been singing my praises about them since the offseason about what they would look like if everyone's on the field. And you had, one of 2 or 1 of 3 things happen, maybe 2 of 3 things happen, which was Vaughn is almost 100%. and Rousseau breaks out, and Epineza picks up where he left off. And it seems like so far, all three of those things are happening to some degree. And what you're getting is just consistent edge pressure and just the interior push from Ed and Daquan Jones, which isn't being talked about because it's just been steady and fun. And I love it. So, I mean, this defense, we'll get to the Ravens matchup, but right now, through 3 games, given the circumstances, I tip my cap to Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott because how can you not with what they faced and some of the offenses they faced that I know are in kind of a rut, but also like Tua was healthy for 3 quarters and still threw 3 interceptions. The Jaguars still had all of their offensive talent and still couldn't put anything together. Like, I'm aware of who they're playing, but it's not like these teams don't have any talent at all. And it's not like, if the Bills didn't do well, we wouldn't be saying something different. So I'm impressed. I'm pleased. David, anything else before we switch gears and go to the next matchup?
Yeah, I would say Jacksonville has talent, right? I mean, they were up 14-0 on Miami in week 1, and then it's kind of gone off the rails since then. And I like what you said about those 3 guys, Miller, Rousseau, and Epinesa, because there was a point in time in this offseason where we had Ed Oliver and we had Gregory Rousseau and Von Miller, and that was kind of like our only 3 guys we had at one point. Then they re-signed Epinesa, then they re-signed Daquan Jones, and things started to fall into place, and you started to think, okay, there's a lot of ifs on this defensive line. Like if Von Miller comes back and plays to his potential, if AJ Epinesa continues his strong play after getting a new contract, if Gregory Rousseau can take that next step, all of those things, like you said, have kind of happened. And even the guys behind them are making some plays too. We saw Hill make some plays late last night as well, Solomon. So that's been nice to see. By the way,
that Hill looked like TJ Watt, dude. Like, I'm not even joking. He where the hell did that come from? I know it was the end of the game and nothing mattered, but I was watching Hill flash on the screen. I'm like, what is this? What's going on?
Just like Eric made a great point, right? When cut down happened, it's clearly Hill's tenure in the NFL and what he's done in real NFL games held a lot of weight to carry him through training camp to make this team versus what maybe some other guys like Kingsley Jonathan or otherwise would have shown in camp. They really trusted what Hill had on tape, obviously, to put him on the team. That drive the Jags had, before we move on, by the way, they got the touchdown, and then the Bills came back with the field goal. Then they went on a 13-play, 43-yard, just under 6-minute drive. So the Bills will take that all day. 13 plays for only 43 yards and 6 minutes off the clock. Yeah, the Bills will take that. And then they turned it over on downs. And then they turned it over on downs anyway. Went for 8 fourth downs, which is wild. So
and I just have to say this to Jaguars fans who might somehow still be watching this show after the matchup. I empathize with you because I do not understand how, as the head coach of a professional football team, when your team is 0-2 after 2 woefully underperforming offensive showcases, how you can stomach watching and scheming up and calling these plays that are taking this much time in a blowout. At least showing urgency, at least showing downfield passing, at least showing anything, to me indicates, hey, we're getting our asses beat, but let's just try to get something here. The fact that you think you have the luxury of doing that while there are fans that are watching this terrible performance and watching you just continue to regress as a team, I would be ashamed of myself. I'm sorry. I don't usually get this extreme on shows, but Doug Peterson should be ashamed of himself. I just think that's absolutely ridiculous to try and take that much time to put a drive together when you're talking about a game that you got to show something, and they just didn't. And yeah, I feel for those fans. I really do. And I'm glad the Bills won it. Any final thoughts, David, before we go to Ravens?
I mean, just think about this Jags team. They were 8-3 to start last year, and then things just totally fell off the rails for them. I think they lost 5 of their last 6, and then they've now lost 3 in a row to start this year. It's just since the middle to even latter stages of last season, when them blowing that division into this year, it's been a downhill spiral for them. And
bad.
I don't dislike Jacksonville. I like Doug Peterson, and I think Trevor Lawrence is overrated. I do like some of their players. They should be better than an 0-3 team right now. So
100%.
And we'll talk about a team that should be better than what they are. 1-2 is the Baltimore Ravens, which we're about to talk about.
Yes, we are. And, final thought. I still like Trevor Lawrence. I haven't given up on Trevor Lawrence. I do think the right coach coming in would absolutely improve his game because there are still traits there when I watch him and I say, he can be good. I know he can be good. I know he can. He's just been dealt two really, like, one hand that was just dreadful and one hand you thought would be good but wasn't. I'm telling you, get this guy a little bit more of a modern offensive mind. I think he'll do well. Okay, no more Jags talk. Anyways, before we kick over to Ravens, David, I just want to real fast plug our One Pass membership. We have our video roll, but I'm just going to read it off this time because it still says Slack, and I want to mention that we are not on Slack anymore. But my friends, for $60 a year, you could become a One Pass member, and I cannot stress enough how much that One Pass matters for our network. It is the lifeblood of our network. It allows us to have access to all of the resources that we are using on a day-to-day basis for anything we do on this network, whether that's pulling the data and pulling the stats, pulling the film, whatever we can do to provide you with more insightful content that has context. I really thought I was going to nail that line. I didn't. It's a great time to be a One Pass member, and you can find the link to sign up in the description below. If you sign up, you will automatically be entered into our current giveaway, which is of 2 Josh Allen jerseys that we will be announcing the winners of on October 3rd. So if you have been considering, pondering, toiling, contemplating signing up for the One Pass for just $60 a year, this is your opportunity to do so. And it's a great time to be a member. We have partnerships going with 26 shirts, and we have partnerships going with TSC Buffalo, and a lot of exciting giveaways and things to check out are happening right now. So I will be I encourage you all to sign up in the link below. Again, it's so worth your time, but what is also worth your time is this upcoming discussion because we have a hell of a matchup on our hands, friends. Bills versus Ravens on Sunday Night Football in Baltimore, a game that pins future 3-time MVP Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen, a game that really, to me, and I've said this every week, but like, nah, I definitely mean that shit now. This is the test. This is a game that if you win this and you dominate, I don't see how you can't be at least a high caliber contending team for the rest of the year. David, let's start with the Bills offense versus the Ravens defense. And I crunched some of the numbers based on their 3-week stretch. Currently, they're 20th in total EPA. However, a lot of the poor reflection comes from their passing defense, which is currently sitting at 23rd. And they are currently 6th in rushing EPA against. So there's been a mixed bag of results when it comes to their passing defense, but this team is stingy against the run. But I'm curious what you think about it and how you think this Bills offense attacks it.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting case study, right? This Ravens team, because when you look at the sort of raw statistics on them defensively, they are last in the NFL in passing yards per game allowed through 3 games. They're first in the NFL in rushing yards allowed through 3 games, and only 50 rushing yards allowed per game. But they've also faced 2 supposedly, well, we know the Chiefs are good, and the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas should have been a tougher test for them. They almost kind of blew the whole thing, and then they lose to the Raiders sort of inexplicably in between that. So it's kind of been a mixed bag for this Ravens team. They did, look pretty good offensively against the Chiefs in week 1. They obviously dominated the Cowboys on the ground in week 2, but defensively, this Ravens team, I think if you look at the stats, you're going to look and say like, oh, well, maybe they're not quite as good as they were a year ago, but you've really got to kind of dive into it further and take a look at who they played with the Chiefs and the Cowboys getting a lot of sort of what I would call somewhat garbage time, right? In trying to make that comeback, because I mean, they did come back, but it was the Ravens kind of allowing that a bit as well. So then you look at DVOA, and they're actually 10th overall in DVOA defense, 13th against the pass, 9th against the rush. So the advanced analytics kind of favor them a bit more than what the raw statistics might show you. They're very disciplined on the defensive side of the ball, 6th fewest penalties in the NFL on the defensive side of the ball. Their front 3 with Matabuke, Pearson, and Travis Jones, who I loved in the pre-draft process, is legit. Roquan Smith is legit. Kyle Van Noy is having himself kind of like a renaissance year. He's leading that team with 4 sacks and 5 tackles for loss. So I would say my caution to Bills fans is don't let some of the raw statistics and some of the points that the Ravens have given up fool you. This is still a team that is loaded with talent on the defensive side of the ball on all three levels. Potential All-Pro and Kyle Hamilton at the back end. Matabuke could be an All-Pro. Roquan Smith potentially could be an All-Pro as well. This team is loaded. They're playing at home. They're 1-2. They're going to want to show that they're still one of the class of the AFC. So I would definitely say this is going to be the Bills' biggest test yet from their offensive standpoint against the Ravens defense. And I don't think that this is going to be an easy task for the Bills offense as much as they've made it look easy through 3 games. I think this Ravens defense at home under the lights is going to be fired up, and this is the game that the Bills truly have to play, I think, mistake-free football on offense.
Firmly agree. It's such a difficult defense because, again, they're not a very blitz heavy defense either. Their line is just very good at winning, and their front seven is as aggressive and athletic as anybody in the league. And you talked briefly about Roquan Smith and then Matabuke and just the members of that D line too. But then some of the young players they have from last year with Trenton Simpson, who's kind of taken over the role that Patrick Queen left behind, and is someone who is just so explosive when you talk about as a pass rusher and in coverage. And even though I think the Bills might benefit from the timing of this matchup when you talk about facing a defense that did lose a lot of coaching experience. Obviously, Mike McDonald's coaching Seattle now, and then Weaver goes over to Miami, and I believe they lost one of their secondary coaches. They lost a lot of coaches, and you might say, hey, maybe they're going to have some kind of growing pains. And you've seen that on example a couple of times, especially in late game situations, which it seems like all 3 weeks that's been a problem for them, right, Dave? Like you talk about that, coverage blown against the Chiefs with Xavier Worthy. You talk about the late game choke to the Raiders where they had Brock Bowers running all over the field. And then you talk about even last week, and they got the win, but it came down to the wire when truthfully it shouldn't have. And that yes. Defense kind of fell asleep at the wheel. It was a bit of garbage time, but also it was kind of like, it was as if the Jaguars sustained that success on that drive. I said I wasn't going to talk about them again. It's as if the Jags sustained success from that first drive through the rest of the half, and the Bills just weren't scoring. Like, they seem to be a defense prone to letting teams back in when they shouldn't. And again, I think that's just a matter of it's early in the year. I think they'll tighten things up. There's just too much talent on that defense to truly regress the way they have. We haven't even talked about the corners, with Humphrey being as experienced as he is. But again, I look to kind of how the Cowboys and how the Chiefs and how the Raiders attacked them, and there were different unique ways, but it was really just kind of taking advantage of like communication errors and also using tight ends at times, because I saw Ferguson getting some meaningful receptions in that Cowboy game, and of course Brock Bowers, who had kind of a coming out party against them as well. And I have to wonder, how much obviously, I think the motion is going to be high in this game. The play action is going to be high in this game. Does the rate continue? But also, how much are we going to see of 12 personnel, and how much are we going to see of Kincaid and Knox on the field at the same time? Do you find that you could find favorable matchups? And is this going to be something you lean on, especially if you're talking about maybe the Bills trying to show run and passing out of a run formation that they typically show? A lot of interesting wrinkles that I'm really curious about, because I do think that, again, despite the Ravens' early season lapses, it's still one of the toughest defenses you're going to face this year, just a myriad of talent. And you just have to ask yourself, like, what are the ways to kind of beat them? Like, how often are you going to be able to exploit them? I just find that really the answer lies in the tight ends. And I think that's a matchup, mainly Kincaid and Knox versus the rest of that in the middle of the field, that I'm going to be watching closely. So, I mean, any other thoughts on their defense versus the Bills offense, David?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and look at that sort of Raiders Ravens game, like by the way, the Raiders, who knows what to make of them, right? You beat the Ravens and then you lose to the Panthers. I don't know. But that Raiders team only had 27 rushing yards against the Ravens in a win, but they dominated through the air in that game. I mean, Minshew was 30 for 38. Devontae was over 100 and a touchdown, 9 catches. Bowers, 9 catches. So, like, their running backs really didn't get involved too much in the passing game, which, again, the Raiders don't really have the best running backs anyway. But if you thought that the Bills opened it up a little bit against this Jaguars team, I think then it's like twofold against this Ravens team. Am I right? Like, if you were holding anything back from that Jags game, like, obviously you've got some stuff probably still saved up. you're not going to have everything thrown out in this game, but you're going to probably bring out some of your more creative passing options in this game. And it's going to be exciting to see because the Bills have already shown some pretty unique in and interesting motions, like we've said, and scheming to get guys open. But I think that, look, Devontae Adams had himself a day. We know Rashee Rice had himself a game against the Ravens. CeeDee Lamb, maybe not as big of a game as some of the other big names, but like the top dogs on the receiving side from these opponents the Ravens have played have fared well. So who's going to step up for the Bills then in that case? We saw Brock Bowers and Ferguson have success. Will it be Kincaid? Which receiver is it going to be that steps up? They have struggled a little bit against some of these bigger receivers, right? In Rice and Adams. Can Coleman, as a rookie, step up in this game? I don't know, but Shakir's going to have a lot of pressure on him in this game. But I think Dalton Kincaid's going to maybe have to be the guy that steps up and really, I don't want to say has his breakout game because he did score against the Jags, but like maybe has his breakout game in terms of yardage and in targets and catches, and where the Bills have kind of spread it out a lot so far this year. And Allen had his most attempts, 30 in this game against the Jags. I could see him going 30 to 40 in this, and Kincaid getting somewhere in that neighborhood of 10 to 12 targets in this one would not surprise me.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And, we talk about this offense being multiple, fluid, and having a lot of ways to beat you. And we also talked about, not having to feed one person consistently. But maybe one of the wrinkles is, hey, in crunch time in a certain situation, based on a certain matchup, we're just going to keep going to a guy. And that guy could be Kincaid. And again, for as good as those linebackers are, as good as their safeties are, you did see times where they can be exploited in pass defense. And it just feels like, again, a defense that hasn't found its footing fully yet. And I just have to wonder if the Bills are going to see that and try to take advantage with a ton of pre-snap motion, a ton of play action. Also, like, even though Josh hasn't ran a ton, trying to get his legs more involved too, because I think where you could stress this Ravens defense is really, again, kind of how you stress the Jaguars, which was rolling Josh out to his right and left and just like leaving him all that space because he didn't think that they were going to do it, and it just throws you off. I'm wondering how often they get Josh to run, because I think that was also a big point of emphasis the last time you faced this Ravens defense that did have some familiar faces that you'll be seeing on Sunday. So really, I think I'm in alignment with you on like who's going to be that big guy. I think it will be Kincaid. I think just, again, your tight ends could have success against this defense. And if you catch them on a night where maybe, there's a lot of energy, but the crowd noise or maybe just like communication errors happen, I think that they can definitely take advantage of it, because Joe Brady has been trying very hard to make things difficult pre to post snap. And the Jaguars got taken advantage of, and you just hope you can do the same for Baltimore. But it's a tough defense. I still think it's a huge challenge. And pivoting over to the offense, the Ravens offense and the Bills defense, which, this will be the end point on this matchup analysis, because man, this is I hate playing Derrick Henry, dude. Like, I'm just gonna say it. I hate when this team has to play Derrick Henry. I hate dealing with Derrick Henry. You had a few weeks where you were kind of thinking like, did he lose a step? Is he not the same? And then just that Cowboys game when he broke off for the run, I was like, no, he's not. And then you think about like the RPOs the Ravens run, and the fact that Lamar can be a threat to run, but now they have a gigantic man, like I basically the size of a refrigerator running at you full speed. Like, I don't like this matchup. And I'm not saying, and I see spin, Bills have always been able to handle Henry. Well, one, no, Henry's had 100-yard games and like breakout games against the Bills. They've had success against them in the past, just not always. Two, it's still incredibly difficult when you're talking about defending the run and defending Lamar Jackson in those RPOs and having to deal with guessing at the line of scrimmage. And if you're wrong, getting punished. So, I mean, David, what do you think about this matchup? What are your expectations?
Oh man, you saw how dangerous this Ravens offense can be with Lamar and Derrick Henry both running the ball. They just absolutely dominated Dallas in that regard. And the thing that scares me is like Dorian Williams and Balon Spector are good coming downhill, good defending the run. I think they can do an okay job on Henry. It's Lamar running off of some of these RPOs that really worries me in this game. And Kyler Murray got a few runs against the Bills in week 1. We know Trevor Lawrence can scramble. He didn't really do that against the Bills, and Tua obviously didn't do it in the 3 quarters he played against Miami. So this is going to be a big test for this Bills team. They've done a pretty good job at defending Lamar individually, right, in the pass running, and they've done a pretty good job at defending Derrick Henry individually in the past outside of a game or two. But now them together and having to account for both of them, that's really what makes this Ravens team so difficult to defend offensively. This is a battle of the number 1 and the number 2 DVOA offenses. Bills number 1, Ravens are number 2. The Ravens are the number 1 rushing DVOA offense. They're one of only 2 teams, the Packers, surprisingly the other, that are averaging over 200 rushing yards per game. The third team is the Eagles at 167. So they're clear by almost 40 yards of the team behind them in rushing yards per game. And they put up 450 plus yards of offense against both the Chiefs and the Cowboys. So this is going to be a tough offense to contain. Derrick Henry's averaging 5 yards per carry on this season. He has an average over 4.4 since 2020. Lamar's only been sacked 3 times this year. Lamar himself is averaging 7.3 yards per rush on the season. And I know it's only 3 games. His career average is 6.1. So he's above that, at least through a couple games. Where you got to hang your hat on this is like where the Ravens are going to beat you in the passing game if the Bills can get into some favorable down and distances on third downs, right? That's where you got to live if you're the Bills, even though the Ravens are a good team at converting third downs, and we know that they're not going to be afraid to go for it on fourth downs. I kind of worry that Mark Andrews is going to show up this week. He only has 6 catches on the year, and I feel like they're going to make some kind of effort to get him the ball this week. So between him and Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson running the ball, Derrick Henry running the ball, they still have Isaiah Likely, who's kind of disappeared since week 1, but he's going to be an issue. This is going to be a challenge for this Bills defense, their toughest one of the year so far.
And to further this comment from Darnell Davis, who says, you guys said the same thing when the Bills beat the Ravens in Baltimore in 2021 and the Raiders won against the Ravens, but Buffalo Bills can't. Please stop. It's not saying that that they can. It's just, it's still challenging. Like, I think I'm just paying more of a tribute to the fact, the Ravens offense still has this talent. And what I was going to get to and why I brought this comment up is because it does roll into the point of Sean McDermott defending Lamar Jackson and defending the Ravens running offense and how they do it. And, they've been able to contain Lamar. Like, that's the thing that I think Sean McDermott has under his belt in the matchups that they played him, even in the one in 2019 where they still lost, but kind of kept him a little bit in check in his MVP year. Lamar didn't have the craziest, most explosive day. And I definitely think the comment I brought up from Walter before, that Cowboys interior D-line is dreadfully bad. It's not even bad. Like, it's woefully terrible. They have no interior penetration whatsoever. And their draft pick that they picked, Mozzie Smith, for most of that game was getting tossed around. Like, and I think the Bills' interior D-line is significantly better than Dallas is. And I think that you have plenty of talent that would be able to stop interior running. I think just where I get concerned is, again, like, you could talk about, well, if it's a clear handoff to Henry, can they bear down on it? And I think they can. If it's a very clear quarterback run, can they track Lamar down and set the edge? I think they can. It's just always with the Ravens, this guessing game of what they're going to do. And it requires exactly misdirection, reading it in real time, reacting in real time, being able to keep the gaps clean in case a linebacker has to come down and stop the run, or usually a nickel. Now Cam Lewis, because Teron Johnson won't be playing, and neither will Terrell Bernard. But it's just that guessing game and that hesitation it might cause is what worries me with a few more, I don't want to say inexperienced, but not your starting players. And this will be a test for them. But also, again, you brought up Mark Andrews, like the tight ends they have. And the fact that Isaiah Likely is what I would consider the best tight end 2 in the league, and I would even call him a tight end 1 on a ton of teams, like, he's really good. Mark Andrews hasn't lost it. Mark Andrews just hasn't been the focal point. He's been doing a lot of back end work and getting his receptions when he can. If this Ravens offense is trotting out looks where you have Lamar Jackson with Derrick Henry in the backfield with 2 tight ends on the field, I'm terrified. And you better be playing the most disciplined defense you can, because in addition to the receiving threats that the Ravens have with their tight ends, you also have blocking threats and what that can do, even if you do read and react correctly, and what they could do downfield. So listen, this Ravens, real quick call. No, Cam Lewis is playing. Teron Johnson isn't playing. it's a tough offense to read and react to. It's a tough offense to defend. But do I think the Bills can do it? Yes, because they've had past success against Lamar Jackson. There's familiarity there. And despite the really good rushing ability of Lamar, despite the running backs they've had, we haven't even talked about Justice Hill either, who I also think is a really nice compliment to that room. Sean McDermott and what Bobby Babich, what they've been able to do together in terms of discipline, in terms of being sound and run defense, and, really, again, I talked about the metrics not looking great, but I do think that has way more to do with game plan and time of game than it does actual talent of the rushing defense. And talking about how they fared in the past, I think they can get it done. I just think it is a challenge to stop all of these guys. And I think the Ravens are going to get a few punches off, maybe for a touchdown, maybe for an explosive play. But again, we'll just have to see. It's a tall task, but I think the Bills can get it done against the Ravens. But, again, just tough matchup. What do you think, David? Anything else you want to point out?
I mean, it's a huge matchup for an early season matchup. Now, it's not going to make or break the Bills season, let's say, right? Because we knew this was going to be a tough matchup from the get-go, right? We expected the Ravens to be one of the big contenders in the AFC, but if you can knock them down to 1-3, and look, I mean, there's an outside chance. Yes, I know they're going to bounce back and they're going to end up being pretty good, but like, you knock them down to 1-3, you have to start thinking about, like, there's other teams, the Steelers, the Chargers, like, I mean, they're still probably going to make the playoffs and they still may very well win that division, but like, knocking them down to 1-3, like, you never know what could happen, right? Like if you don't want to see Lamar in the playoffs, maybe you do want to see Lamar, I don't know, but like, to me, if you could just give them one more loss to where at the end of the season, that could be the difference between them making the playoffs or not. Yeah, I'm all for that. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself, obviously, but I do think the Bills will be up to the task. I think that it will be a dogfight. I think it will be a close game. I don't think either team is going to, run away with this one, I'll say. I think it will be maybe one of the most entertaining games on the NFL slate so far for the season to date. And I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be tough in Baltimore, night game, but that atmosphere will be fun either way. And man, I don't know. I could go either way on this one.
I could too. Again, it's a lot of respect to a Ravens team that, again, the record is not reflective of what they are as a team that I definitely don't think has found its stride yet, but will. I'm hoping it's not Sunday night, but there's, a possibility that, again, it's a dogfight to the end and it's going to come down to maybe a final drive or maybe stopping the run on a final drive and keeping them out, avoiding Justin Tucker. Like, this is one of those games that when you just look at how these teams stack up against each other this year, and again, with how good the Bills defense has played despite the losses, but those losses still being something you have to account for. I just wonder, it feels like again, even with the record, it feels like two Goliaths going at each other and like two big boys of the AFC going at each other. And one big thing is, the Bills are 3-0 and they have two AFC wins, and that's fantastic. Obviously, you want to keep that going. And I think that, do I expect them to go undefeated in this next stretch? No. I think the first loss will happen to one of these three teams, but I'm looking at what the Jets are doing right now. You pointed them out before. The Jets this week are going to play Denver, and Denver, has actually had a pretty decent defense going on for them this year, but the offense has just not really found its wings. They played well against Tampa Bay, but I still think with the way the Jets defend, they're going to put Bo Nix in a blender. So you talk about that game, and then the game after they have before they play Buffalo on Monday Night Football is an NFC game against the Vikings. Even if the Vikings win, it's not really that consequential. You got to keep ground with them. The reality is, despite all the negative things, a lot of Bills fans have said about the Jets, they're there. They're not going anywhere until they're proven otherwise. They're a 2-1 team. If they beat Denver, they have another AFC win under their belt after defeating Tennessee and New England, which means they get their third one. And if you don't take this game against Baltimore, you're talking about being a game under in the AFC race with them. And that's just something that you have to take into account with a team that, as long as they're healthy, is going to be tough for the year's end. So, if you have them looking, in your rearview mirror at them, it's still a must-win game. It's still an AFC game that you have to take. And then, like you pointed out, David, and I love that point, like, why not just try to throw another L at a team that is going to be there at the end of the year, and it could be all the difference. And I'm really hoping that this is the case and that the Bills are able to do it. We'll just have to see. But like I said, tough matchup, not one I don't think the Bills could win. I could see a world where the Bills go in there and it's very similar to 2022's game where maybe it starts ugly and they figure it out at the end, or maybe it's just close to the end and Josh Allen pulls out a late drive that ends up giving them the advantage. But, the Ravens RPOs and the tight ends are going to be something I watch. And then on their defense, again, just how do you attack it if you're Josh Allen and the Bills? How much motion play action do you show? And are the tight ends your focal point? So those are my final thoughts on that matchup. I mean, David, do you have anything else before we say goodnight?
Wouldn't it be funny if the Bills just came out and like tried to run it down their throats and actually were successful? I don't think they will, but the Ravens, like, I mean, the Raiders really didn't do anything to them on the ground. The Chiefs, somewhat with Pacheco, but not really. And then Dallas did really nothing to them on the ground either. So who knows? Maybe the Bills are like, hey, maybe this Ravens defense hasn't been tested enough on the ground. But no,
Yeah.
I think we'll see. I think we'll see 30 plus pass attempts again from Josh in this game, and we'll just have to see. I'm not making my prediction yet. I'll save that for the pregame show, but I think it'll be tight. I'll say that. I think it'll be tight.
That is an interesting point too, because I mean, you look at the Raiders rushing attack and the Cowboys rushing attack, and both are subpar. Like, call it what it is. Both are not good. And, I have a feeling that this Bills team isn't going to just abandon the run entirely with how big of a focal point James Cook is. I've been asking for this for a few weeks, David, and I tweeted about it, but like, you think this is the week that Ray Davis isn't just like a late game piece, but rather like an actual rotational component to try and just be more physical on the ground with your offensive line? Like, do you think that maybe they trot him out a little bit more earlier on in more key roles and just like try to set him up for success? Because I really hope they do. Like, again, you want to impose your will on a team like the Ravens. If you want to set the precedent for like what the AFC's contender looks like, imagine pairing James Cook and giving Ray Davis more shine, or even Ty Johnson if you want to, and just being physical as hell on the ground and actually showing that despite the rushing defense metrics for the Ravens, this Bills team came to play and pushes them around a little bit. Do I think it'll be 300 yards? No, but I could see a world where maybe the Bills rushing attack is better in this game than we expect, just because, again, outside of the Chiefs, who had some solid rushes against them with Pacheco, they haven't really been tested on the ground significantly. So I'm pumped for this matchup, David. I really am. Like, I love playing the Ravens and I love playing Lamar. I think he's awesome, despite all the offseason commentary about his MVP. Like, it's just a fun game, and it's fun to see this on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, it's going to be an anxious and anxiety-filled Sunday waiting for that, like literally waiting all day for Sunday night, like they say in the song. It will be an anxiety-filled day. I don't know about Ray Davis because I wonder if they're gonna still. I mean, they've trusted him a little bit. They put him in on a series or two, but they really haven't given him multiple series of meaningful snaps other than like end game scenario where they're running the clock out. So I'm not sure. I'd love to see it because I think the Bills would benefit from that in the long run, but I'm not sure. And keep in mind too, remember when the Bills played the Eagles last year, this was shortly after, Ken Dorsey was fired. It was like the second or third game, maybe after Ken Dorsey was fired. The Eagles came into that game as the number one rush defense. It was a road game for the Bills, and the Bills committed to the run and stuck with it with James Cook, and he had some really nice runs in that game. So who knows? Maybe there's some parallels we can draw to that.
I certainly hope so. We'll just have to see, as we've said the whole night, and we're waiting all day for Sunday night anxiety, Sunday night panic attacks, as we always do when it's a primetime game. But David Tilton, you are always an awesome guest. I appreciate your insight whenever you're on this show. Again, guys, Air Raid Hour every Monday night, unless there's Monday Night Football. But if there's anything I haven't alluded to already, David, the floor is yours to promo whatever you got going on and anything you want to say before we sign off.
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. Second, condolences to you and your family for Gibson. I got a 13-year-old dog myself right now, and obviously she's in her twilight years as well, and so that day is coming inevitably here somewhat soon. So I understand that, and I'm glad you could kind of talk about that. And then thirdly, I guess for us on the Air Raid Hour, we're going to be doing a pregame show Sunday. I'm not exactly sure what time it'll be. It may be in the morning to kind of like allow people to kind of watch it when they have time throughout the day. And then, yeah, we'll be back on our normal Monday slot, 9 p.m. The day after that Sunday night game to see. Hopefully it's not a therapy session and it's a positive one.
Oh, hey, listen, therapy sessions can still be fun. Winning.
We always feel better
help.
afterwards. We always feel better afterwards, no matter what. So it's
Yeah.
okay.
But even if they win, I mean, hey, people still want to vent about their joy. That's always a good thing. That's productive. But no, David, thank you so much for being here. And I appreciate that. And all my best and, all my love to your furry friend as well. Like, give her a big hug for me, give her a big pet for me, because obviously our pets are our best friends. And again, I wish everyone who watched this show and you guys could have gotten a chance to meet Gibson, because he was a good boy. But for me, my name is Joe DeRosa. You could find me on Twitter /X @show_DeRosa. And we say to all of you beautiful people, Joe revoir. This is going to be a good game. We're super excited for it. No matter what happens, we still believe in the Bills. But thank you all so much for being here and checking us out on this week's episode of Under Review. If you are here with us live, please, before you go, just drop a like, smash the like button. It helps the show and our network out tremendously. If you're watching after the fact, same drill if you're on YouTube. And if you are listening to us on audio platforms of any kind, rate the show 5 stars, get it in front of more ears. It would be greatly appreciated. Again, One Pass sign up link in the description below. Check it out and get your chance to be a One Pass member and insider today. But for David Tilton, my name is Joe DeRosa. Thank you all so much. Go Bills. Stay safe. Enjoy your time. Enjoy your week. We love you, Gibson. We'll see you soon. Take care.